What do you like about the video? If you can unmute yourself and let's talk about that while we wait for Mr. Julius. Who wants to go first? Brian.
He wasn't here. Was he here? I don't think he was here.
He was here.
Were you here, Brian?
Brian was here, man.
Oh, yes, he was here. Brian, yeah. You were here.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I was trying to give
oh
you
man,
an
I played a video, man. It was like an intro.
I'm joking. The power of teamwork, obviously, is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And one person can't get it done.
Awesome. Teamwork makes the dream work, man. Yeah, that's what it's about. You're looking good, man.
Fresh.
My wife is laughing at me at the background.
Where is she?
I'm gonna turn the camera.
Hello. Okay, nice. All right. So you got any questions for Mr. Julius?
I don't think I would want to use up any time for my questions because I have a feeling that most folks, once they get exposed to what he's going to say, it's going to provoke a series of questions.
Yeah.
I don't want to start with the hard stuff first. I'd rather just let it carry its path.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, brother. So Mr. Julius joined us now. So Mr. Julius, If you can unmute yourself.
Hello, how are you?
Hello,
Good to see
hello.
everybody here. Very well.
So we've never met. I'm Akeem. And here's my wife, Nicole.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
I read your profile. Funny enough, a lawyer that I work with in terms of closing real estate deals and so on recommended you and spoke highly of you. So it was a privilege talking to you. And with all the experiences and everything you have. Just to summarize, I know you're the best person to advise us for the structure of basically what we're trying to do. So based on discussion on what I explained to you on the phone, we're a group of professionals. We're Black. We love our people, and we want to come together. We believe it's about time to come together and to build a community that we'll be proud of. Not a community that is given to us, but a community that we build ourselves, for us, by us. That is the motto. And also we want to do it collectively as a group. So based on that, you have the floor. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Akeem, for inviting me. And I'm really honored. I feel very privileged to be able to speak to all of you who are here on this forum today. I feel so humbled by your desire to reach out to me, and hopefully that I could help you and the rest of the team in walking through this process and ultimately finding out something that can actually happen in terms of being able to develop a vehicle for carrying out the business interest or the business idea that this group has come together to kind of sort of bring to fruition or make that dream come true. So as Akeem has said, so my area of practice for the last, actually I've been a lawyer for the last 24 years, but in the last 14 years, a lot of my work has involved working with startups and businesses in Liberty Village. So if you know a little bit of downtown Toronto, Liberty Village has a lot of technology companies, people in the social media, marketing and advertising, and a lot of them are startup companies. So that's where my office is located. And for the last 14 years, I've been working with a lot of businesses in that area, mostly in the capacity of helping them with starting up, registering, getting certificates of incorporation, setting bank accounts, and then launching them up. And then from that point on, basically providing strategic advice. So I do advise a number of businesses in all types of commercial areas. So I have been told that the idea here is basically to develop a vehicle for investment to help carry out sort of this vision of building a community for people of African descent who are able to come together, put some money, build a commercial enterprise, and then sort of carry out those big goals that some of which Akeem has been able to share with me in the last 2 days that we've been talking. So generally speaking, the best vehicle, obviously, as you've discussed in your previous meetings, is the establishment of a corporation. Now, in Canada and in Ontario specifically, we have 3 types of corporations. So we have what is called a private company or a private corporation. And then we have what we call public companies. And public companies are the types of companies that are traded in the Toronto Stock Exchange, like Bell Canada or Rogers, for example. And then the third one is crown corporations. So these are basically government corporations owned either by the federal government or the provincial government. But the one that really interests us mostly today is the private company, because that's sort of the one that is relevant for the type of idea that we want to carry out here. So I understand that there's been no corporate vehicle established yet, although there's been a name that has been identified. And I believe Akeem has already secured or reserved that name and that is available for registration. So in terms of process, basically what we're required to do to make this happen is to incorporate that name. In other words, to move that name from merely being reserved into an actual corporate name or corporate entity. And basically there's a process. Once you get the name reserved, you can present the name for registration within 90 days. And all they require is there'll be a list of the initial corporators or directors for that matter. It could be 1 director, 2 directors, 3 directors, whatever number that the organization or the business or the group decides to choose to be the initial corporators of the number of directors. They would provide their addresses, their names, and also the what would appear to be the initial corporate office. Now, that corporate office could be a commercial building, or it could also be a residential address where the government can send documents to the corporation. Typically, the people that qualify as directors of a corporation for purposes of registration must be someone who's at least 18 years old, is mentally sound, and has not filed bankruptcy in the past. Okay, so there's a process. We'll obtain the documentation, and that's obviously something that I can help you guys put together. Typically, a corporation certificate should be available within 48 hours of receiving these instructions, and we put that together. And then once that's done, the corporation can proceed to open a bank account. Now, as you know already, a corporation is different and separate from the individual directors and also the individual shareholders. So one of the advantages of incorporating a business is it protects you from any future legal liability. So for example, if someone was to file a lawsuit against the corporation, the individual owners of the corporation, namely the shareholders, are not personally liable for an award in a court against the corporation. The corporation itself is a person in law, and the corporation will basically take care of whatever those financial liabilities are. So that's one of the major benefits of incorporating. And I feel it's important to address that because I'm sure there are probably going to be questions about individual liability and stuff like that. Just so you know, as an owner of a corporation, as a shareholder, your interests are protected to the limit of your shares in that corporation. It's not personal to you. So if I obtain a judgment of $50,000 against Pamoja, for example, I'll come for the assets of the corporation to recover that money. I'll go into your bank account, I'll look at your building. If you have stuff I can take or your vehicles, I'll take those to recover my 50,000. I cannot come and take your TV or your personal car as an individual shareholder. So that's part of the benefits of incorporation and protection for the shareholders. In terms of how shares are divided, you probably have read this already, but there are basically two classes of shares. So there'll be Class A shares, where all of the shareholders who are in that category have equal voting rights and voting powers. And then there are Class B shares, which are typically issued to shareholders who are designated as not having voting powers or voting rights. Now, typically shares are issued upon payment of a predetermined amount of money, being the investment amount in the corporation. So once we finish this meeting, after all of you sit down and decide, well, how much are we looking to invest here? Maybe $1 million. Okay, how much are we able to raise? So whatever you raise, there's going to be a financial group that will sit down and determine how to designate that investment as a share. Okay, that's what gives you ownership in the corporation. So you become a shareholder by actually putting money into the corporation, which is your investment. Over the years, that money will grow. So you may put in $5,000 today. 10 years later, that could be $100,000. So that's how your money grows. The last item I wanted to point out is, so owning shareholders cannot be more than 50 shareholders in a private corporation, the type that we're talking about, okay? So for a private company to basically have more than 50 shareholders, it would have to become a public corporation. That means it would have to be traded on the stock exchange, which then gives you the power to basically attract money from the public, from the general public for that matter. We are not yet there. So what we're talking about is we're trying to establish a private company which would have only a limited number of 50 shareholders. Now, I do understand that this could pose a problem right now because the general interest that has come out of the community there has been probably in the range of between 250 to almost 300 people from what I understand.
Yes.
But let's just assume that, for example, all these 250 or 300 people want to become shareholders. There are a number of things that can be done to make sure that somehow that everybody is included or that idea is met. So under the Ontario Business Corporations Act, a private company cannot have more than 50 shareholders, okay? And so if you exceed that number, then you quickly become governed by the Ontario Securities, the Ontario Securities Act, okay? Now, so what do you do if you're a private company that doesn't have the capacity to become public at this stage to somehow make sure that you include more than 50 shareholders? So some of the strategies allowed by the Act is that You can have joint ownership of shares by, for example, a couple. So if I and my wife wanted to become shareholders, we can join up together, and then that becomes one share for purposes of that 50 shareholding, or members of a family. So say a couple together with their two adult children who want to become shareholders can bunch up together, and that will become one share by either two people or four people. So that's one strategy. The other strategy is that if they're shareholders who are employees of the corporation, they are not included among the 50. So if you have 10 employees, for example, and you wanted to issue them shares in the corporation, those 10 employees can own shares, but they will not be considered as part of the 50. Okay. Another way is that you actually have independent corporations that have been established by, say, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 people buying shares into this corporation as well. So that's another way of basically making sure that you kind of limit yourself within that 50, a number of 50 shareholders. So that's sort of the quick presentation I wanted to make, and then sort of just open the forum for questions that you may have heard earlier or that have been generated by this presentation. But in short, that really is the incorporation process.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I have a question. The first question I have is, how does stock splitting work?
Share splitting.
Yeah.
So the way that here's how it works. I'll give you in brief. Obviously, that this is a question that can actually be more dealt with deeply by people in your financial team. If you have a financial committee, accountants will tell you this. But basically, the way it works is if you decide. So, for example, based on the conversation I've had with you, Akin, I understand that there's a desire here to purchase, say, a 200-acre piece of land, and then use about 75% of that developed as a commercial entity, and the other 25% might be residential accommodation for the individual shareholders, right? Yeah. So when you look at a big project like that, the financial undertaking is huge. You're looking at the cost of land and then the cost of development. Now, some of that money may come from the investors here, and some of it may actually be financing from financial institutions like banks, for example. Now, typically, your finance team would sit down with you and they'll make a determination. If you look at the value of this investment today, if we had all the money ready, we're probably looking at, say, anything between 1.5 to say, $4 million to invest. Now, not all of that will come out of pocket, but let's say, depending on how many we have that are willing to invest right now, just from within this group, whether it's within that 50 or 150 or 100. And let's say the minimum investment, for example, we need to buy that piece of land is say $1 million. Okay. Mm-hmm. You can capitalize the company at $3 million, even though what you need immediately is just $1 million. Okay. But you're looking at the capital value because you're going to add value to that piece of land. Split that $1 million into, say, the number of people that are ready to put the money on the table. So for the sake of argument, let's say each person is contributing, say, $5,000. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that $5,000, you divide it into the 3 million. That gives you the general number of shares that the corporation has said these are the shares that are available for us to sell. But the contribution made by the members is just 1 million. So 5,000 divided by 1 million will give you the number of shares actually issued. So based on that, you decide, well, what we think is the nominal value of our shares. So you might say something like, okay, let's start with, this is a young company. We don't have any land. We don't have any assets out there. So let's just give it a nominal value. Say, well, let's say one share is worth $50, for example. So if I contribute $5,000, right, that means I have 100 shares in the corporation. So that's how you determine share values as you go. But I mean, your accountant and the finance people will advise you better, and I can work with them to figure this out once we get there, once we get that point. But what we need to clear, first of all, before we even get to stocks and shares and all of that, is the issue of registration and how we're going to make sure that we meet this 50 number of shareholders limit requirement.
Exactly.
By the Ontario
government. So
Ontario Business Corporations Act.
So far, you have a great understanding of what we're trying to achieve as a group. And you know the law very well. If you're in our position, what route will you go, and why?
So right now, because you're regulated, because as a private company, you're going to be regulated by the Ontario Business Corporations Act. Okay,
Yeah.
Whatever we do has to comply with the act. That is the first step. This is the bottom line. So whatever we do has to comply with the law because we cannot operate outside of the law.
Yes.
Okay. So how many people are there right now who've actually shown interest in investing in this company?
I mean, I'll say anywhere between 200 to 300 people, honestly.
That's pretty large.
Yeah.
It's pretty large compared. I mean, if you consider the fact that we're just limited to 50. I mean, if we were like even say 75, for example, or 100, we could find ways in which people could pair up or bunch up, and then those pairing up or bunching up becomes a single share, right? And then in that way, you can kind of meet that 50 limit, right? I don't know how you're going to do, because the other option, which may not be a very good option at this point, would be to basically split the 300 and form like 4 or 5 different companies, and then have the other companies buy shares into Pamoja, for example. Now, the only problem with that is that under the Ontario Securities Act, you cannot form a company merely for purposes of buying shareholding into another company in order to circumvent these 50 numbers limit requirement. In other words, you could still have companies buying into Pamoja, but they must have been pre-existing.
Yes, so which is perfect because I mean we've not registered Pamoja yet.
Yes.
So the other companies, if we do go ahead and register them, the idea I had, today, just thinking, is we can have, for instance, Pamoja East, Pamoja West. These are just ideas, right?
Yeah,
Pamoja
sure.
Central, Pamoja, North, Pamoja South, and those different companies are like subsidiaries of like the big parent company, right? Would that work? Like if something like that is established?
Okay, so that's an interesting thought. So I think the only difficulty with that is you'd have to establish the parent company first before you have the subsidiary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the way it works. So the parent company gives birth to the subsidiaries, right? But also the other restriction we have is if it's a parent company, how many the shareholding is still going to be limited to the 50.
It's still going to be limited, yeah.
Yeah, and then the buying it, because you see the thing with subsidiary is it's like they're affiliates of the parent company.
Parent, yeah.
Yeah, they're not really independent as such. But the idea we're talking about, which is if you incorporate 2 or 3 or 4 other companies, they would be independent, but they would buy shareholding into the parent company, Pamoja, right?
Yeah.
So they come as independent entities already established. Because a shareholder can also be a corporation. A shareholder can be an individual or a group of individuals, or also a corporation or a corporate entity.
Yeah,
so
makes total sense. Makes total sense. We just have to kind of find a way around this 50 number. We have to find a way around it.
Making sure that we include everybody because the number is really large. If this was like just 75 people, we would have found ways of sinking the other 25 into, bunching up. But with 300, I mean, so even out of 20, if you knock off 50, you still have 250. What do we do with all these people? I mean, it's so hard to get all these 250 to somehow bunch up into pairs. And then even then, you're only limited to up to another 50 from the original. There's some questions actually right here on the
chat.
Yeah. So would a syndication work for Pamoja? I'm not sure what a syndication is, but it's probably, I don't know if the person can clarify. Is it the same thing we're talking about, which is kind of having companies buying in as shareholding? I'm not sure what syndication means.
All right, Natalie, can you unmute yourself and explain your question, please?
Hello. Hi, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening.
So syndication is, I guess you could say it's an old term, sort of like crowdfunding. So it's where you have a large scale real estate investment and you can get people to basically fund it. And so various people, they're not owners though. So that was my question for the gentleman speaking there. How would that work? Really, it's more of an investment vehicle than anything else. It's an investment
Right.
vehicle to fund
Sure, yeah.
the project to make money,
Yeah.
but they're not necessarily owners.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's a great idea as well. That's another way to go when you're thinking about the people that are providing the financing, not necessarily looking to become owners or shareholders in a company. A lot of people actually do that publicly, especially when companies are starting out and they're looking for they call seed money. They go to the open market, either to a group of people they already know or they don't know from before, and basically they're asking for $5, 10, $20,000 from different people. And that money, it constitutes an investment into the company, right? And it's money that would have to be paid back, 5 years later with interest or profit on top of it. So it's really an investment, but the people providing this money or the seed money are not looking to own shares in that particular company.
Yeah.
They're simply providing a loan to help the company start up and to be paid back within whatever period agreed,
Yeah.
on profit.
So, sir, I kind of like that idea in a way, because I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to do this collectively as as one big family. So if the corporation is registered, we can raise money like seed money, like you called it. Is there a form of like an agreement that we can put in place between the company and those people offering to bring in the seed money and the investors? Have that agreement in place, and also do it in such a way that the interest payment is deferred for a period of time. Maybe we defer it for like maybe 5 years, because in this case, what we're trying to do is we're trying to purchase land. Obviously, there won't be anything on the land, but we will have to go through a development phase where we will have to develop the land and all that, right? So can that work in this case?
Yeah, so that can work as well. And then to answer your question, yes, there are agreements, because an agreement is what's going to protect this investor who is giving you the seed money. It will contain terms as to how much is paid, when is this money refundable, what is the rate of interest expected, all of that. And it's an agreement that is signed between the investor or the person providing the seed money and the corporation, and it's obviously going to be guaranteed by the individual directors of this particular corporation. So that can be done, and those agreements can be structured. I've actually done those similar in the past. The only caution, though, I would have to make in that regard, from what I've seen from my experience, is that if the investment goes burst, then potentially the people that are given this seed money could lose their investment, and that can bring a problem. So we have to be really careful going that direction. I've seen situations where directors have ended up with lawsuits or even in jail because the investment didn't go well, and it's 10 years, and somebody gave $10,000, and that $10,000 is not even available, leave alone the interest that was agreed on it. So we got to be really careful about going that direction, but it's certainly a good idea. A lot of people have actually raised money and successfully conducted projects and have been able to pay that money back, 4 or 5 times the original investment value. Another question, does the 50 shareholding limit include both Class A and Class B shareholders? Yes, if you're a private company, along the lines that we're discussing here, then yes, that includes Class B and Class. If you decide to divide it in classes, it will include both Class B and Class A shares. Now, if you're a publicly traded company, then you're not limited. You could have the people that started the corporation as all Class A shareholders, and then those who are buying stocks later through the Toronto Stock Exchange, for example, who don't necessarily need to have voting rights, those become your Class B shareholders, and the number is unlimited from that point on. But as long as you're a private company, whether you decide to split them into Class A or B shares, you're still limited by that number of 50 shareholders.
Okay, so we have all these great options. Thank you so much. So my wife is going to read another question for me.
So one of the questions that were sent in previously, what time frame do we have in mind? Oh,
this is more.
So this is more our question. Yeah. I'm eager to build a home. How do they do?
There's actually a comment by Grace Brown. She says, I think pairing up is a good idea. So again, this is just
Yeah.
thoughts coming from the group as
So,
well.
Yeah, most
so
of the
this is
questions
what
are-
some of the suggestions and
There's another one.
ideas you've given us. We will bring it back to the group.
Mhm.
And we have a power team who's like more of like the heartbeat and the brain behind this project. We're going to be discussing with the power team first, and then
Right.
we can maybe come up with a survey and then bring that up to the larger group and make a decision. And for sure we'll let you know which direction we're going to go as a group.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's another question.
Yeah, here's another question.
Would we be able to register 5 or 6 corporations, then purchase land in partnership? That was actually the very first idea I had when I was having a conversation with Akin a couple of days ago, and we kind of hit this wall of 50, but 300. So that was actually one of the ideas. So in theory, that is actually a possibility, because what would happen is that these 5 or 6 companies would come together, and then you'd all have memorandum of agreement between the companies as to this joint venture into investment over the land. And of course, each of those will be separate entities. So it'll be 5 or 6 separate corporate entities coming together and then agreeing. And then there's an agreement that is binding as well on things like how are we going to raise money? How do we protect the interests of the shareholders? What investment is going to go to what percentage of the land? Things like that. That's a way of doing this as well, in a way that includes all the 300 or 250 members who've shown interest so far.
Nice. Amazing. You have anything to say about
that? If anybody has any more
questions. Any questions? Yeah, let's open the floor.
Yeah,
we
do have some more
Mr.
time.
Julius only here for an hour, so far maybe 20
we got time. Yeah, we got quite a bit of time.
Okay, so how is the founder protected against future theft or overall idea? Okay, and how is the power team protected after investing so much time and effort doing the actual work to build the organization and investment? Good question.
That's a good question. I wish we were having this conversation before this idea sort of went public and everybody got caught on. I only started talking to Akin about maybe Akin, is it 3 days ago? I think we first touched base on Thursday, right? So typically, what people usually do with these types of ideas is when you have an idea like this and you want to involve everybody else, the first thing you sign with everyone involved is something called an NDA. It's a non-disclosure agreement. So a non-disclosure agreement protects you from people that you've already brought into the team from either disclosing to third parties or they themselves stealing your idea after this and running away with it.
Wow.
But the horse is out of the stable already.
Yes.
Here we are. I only met you on Thursday and we've been talking for the last 3 days. But the idea now is in the public domain, at least to the extent that these 250, 300 people know it. If I had met you earlier, I would have said, hey, make sure you have an NDA first of all, with everybody signing in, so that that's what protects you and protects the individual investors as well. But I mean, that's something we can talk about from this point on. I mean, if there's good faith in this group, and I believe that we're all operating in good faith, hopefully that's something that we don't have to deal with, that somehow, 6 months down the line, you realize your idea was stolen and somebody else is running away with it.
Sir, it's funny that you mentioned that because, I mean, the goal is not to make it just about me. So I thought about the NDA, but I felt, at the end of the day, as a people, it's time for us to move on. So whoever does it, to me, it's fine. But the thing is, and then I ended up getting messages from other groups now. I don't want to call their names, but I've received 2 messages so far from other groups that are claiming they want to do something similar. So, and I know it's as a result of the initiative we started.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's what it is, like you said.
It's good for the people. It's good for the people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At this point.
But also, if you look at it from a different perspective, right? Think about it. Just look at the province of Ontario. I mean, there's so much opportunity for development for communities, all communities actually, including, our own African communities. There's so much land, there's so much opportunity for development. But even just for the sake of conversation, if somebody else from this group or even any other group outside of this took the idea and was able to bring other communities together. At the end of the day, if it builds our community and our people or fellow human beings, really there's no loss. I mean, not one single person, not even 200 people can take all of Ontario and build it. But if they could, that would be really great, because the larger the benefit, the more people can be reached out, the better.
Exactly. I love the fact that you said that, because the intentions is from a good place. It's not to make money or anything. So
I think
love that.
The second part of Olu's question about the power team. So this is something that we've kind of really been like, how do we reward the team of people who have been building, like spending hours and hours in meetings and all of that stuff? How do we protect them? How do we reward them?
So what I was thinking, let me just tell you what I was thinking. In terms of the power team, I was thinking that if we have, I was assuming now that we will have enough shares for everybody. I was gonna find a way to reward them with like shares, right, for the effort.
So typically, in my presentation, I mentioned that shareholder, a share can be by way of money invested. Okay, shares can also be distributed based on services provided. Okay, so because the volunteers have been providing a service, when it comes to the point where the company is going to be deciding how to distribute shares, you can have an allocation where part of that share value is by services already provided through volunteering. So for example, depending on the volunteer hours provided, you could actually value that in money terms and then make that part of their investment in addition to any other money that they may pay on top of that. So that's another way. So services, money, all of that can be considered. There's another question. How about the prior discussion about the possibility of a not-for-profit organization? Can that allow us to walk around the 50 persons limitation? So as you notice, just from the name, non-profit. So non-profit literally means that you're not really investing for purposes of making money or generating income. Non-profit is more for providing charitable services or community social services, and there's not really sort of an investment in terms of getting profit out of it. So that's the distinction. So, I mean, there can be a non-profit organization, but it wouldn't really be part of this business investment because the financial goals are completely different.
But the Catholic Church own land too, man. How do they do that?
Yeah, but it's because they have a commercial wing. The Catholic Church is a charity, but it's also a business. Okay, so when you look at their inner story, it's much more complex than what we see on the outside.
But
there's a business wing.
Can we do that though? Can we have like a not-for-profit to get the members? I mean, I know churches that own land too, right? So we can own the non-for-profit arm can own the land, while the for-profit arm gives the develops the land. I don't know. Can we? Is that possible? I'm just trying to
You can do that, but not for purposes of going around that 50 shareholders limit.
Okay.
Yeah. You can have that. I mean, those are great ideas. But if you're just sticking to the 50 shareholders purpose of incorporation, we can't use that to go around that. Yeah, you can have a nonprofit. It would have its objectives and bylaws and directors, and it can do a whole bunch of things. Yeah, certainly. There's another question. So what are the risk differences between a single company getting seed money versus 5 companies working together under an MOU? Okay, that's a good question. The difference is single company getting seed money. Yeah. Well, I think the difference is that if one company gets seed money, it depends on how much it can get on its own, right? Versus, of course, if you expand and 5 different companies are asking for seed money, which means 5 different companies can actually raise more money because they have a wider outreach in the market versus just one company. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is the 5 companies can just agree that only one of them is going to go out there to look for the seed money and the rest will support that effort. So it's really a matter of strategy and also who are you reaching to get the money out from and so on and so forth. But that would have to be an agreement, an approach agreed upon between the 5 corporations.
Okay.
Seed money is one strategy for raising money. Another way is through individual potential shareholders actually contributing money. So if you have, say, 50 shareholders, right? those first 50 shareholders can actually raise money. They can pay money to the corporation from which their shares are going to be determined. That is also investment money. That's capital. Seed money is also capital from people coming from outside who are not going to be shareholders, but they're investing for profit to be paid later out of interest. Bank loans as well. Okay. Even donations from third parties who are just interested in, say, supporting the African community, they're donating without necessarily having to expect anything in the future, back. For example.
So basically, those guys are stakeholders. So we have stakeholders and shareholders, basically.
Yeah. So shareholders, yeah, you can call them, you can call them stakeholders, but they have different interests. Exactly. A shareholder is an owner of the company.
Yeah.
Okay. They're owners of the company. The people that are giving you seed monies are not owners of the company, but they're investors giving you money so you can pay them back with profit. What else? And then you have the bank. The bank is giving you money with interest to be paid back with probably some security or without a security. If you buy land already, they'll charge the title of the land that's going on. Okay, we'll have to register about 5 different corporations which will be operated independently. And then the 5 corporations will collectively fund the purchase and development. Yeah, same idea. Yeah, that's another way that's how you're going to utilize the 5 different companies. But then, of course, it depends on if that's how this group decides to proceed.
Exactly. So no decisions made yet.
Yeah.
We have
so you have a bunch of options to consider.
Exactly.
Based on based on the discussion today.
Yeah.
And whatever you decide, I'll be willing to work with you to facilitate the incorporation process, which at that point will be registering a company, getting the incorporation certificate, articles of incorporation, which then enables you to actually have a bank account, because you can't fundraise if you don't have a bank account. You can't obtain seed money if you don't have a bank account. You can't even receive shareholder monies if you don't have a bank account. And then after that, we'll be talking about things like what are going to be the bylaws of the corporation, shareholder agreements, for example. Because at the end of the day, we have to protect each of the individual investors. And if the investors are shareholders, we got to protect their investment through a shareholding agreement, which will contain things like if a shareholder wants to sell their shares, or if they want to exit, and things like that. Or if they want their grandchild to inherit it, or their child to inherit it, all that is taken care of in the shareholder agreement. The bylaws basically deal with the internal operations of the corporation. And then with the seed money people, these are investors. So if we go that route, we'll have separate agreement with each of the individual investors providing the seed money, whether it's $5, $10, $20, $50,000, and how they're going to be paid back, within what period of time. Is it 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and at what percentage of interest?
Okay. All right, there's another question.
Okay.
We also want to register a non-for-profit arm to help with developing community services. What does that entail?
Okay, so registering a nonprofit, so there's a separate registration for nonprofits. And basically for nonprofits, so this is through Industry Canada. For nonprofits, you kind of just need to identify the name that you want for the nonprofit. The objectives of the nonprofit have to be very clear as well. And if it's a nonprofit that is going to be issuing tax receipts, then you're going to be very careful, because you're going to have to apply to CRA as well to be allowed to get a charitable number, which then allows you to issue tax receipts. And there are basically the objectives they're looking for. Typically, the objectives for a nonprofit that is going to be looking to issue tax receipts or have a charitable number has to be focused on education. So are there educational purposes? Are you pursuing anything in the promotion of education within your community? Or the other one is poverty alleviation. Are you involved in activities that are helping in alleviation of poverty within your community in Canada? And the third one is religious purposes. Are you pursuing any religious or spiritual purposes? So these 3 have to be very clear. It could be either all the 3 of them or at least one of them, but they have to be very, very clear that this is the purpose of the object for which the nonprofit is established as part of its community development. There's a separate registration process for that. And of course, if you guys come to that point as well, there will be a separate wing and we can get the registration facilitated as well.
All right, there's another question here.
I think Yvonne wants to, she has a hand up for a while. So Vaughn, can you lower your hand and just, you can ask your question now. Unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, thanks so much. I I think my question, I know I was up for a little bit. I think my question was answered, but I just wanted to echo the sentiments that were voiced earlier, that having an NDA and all of that. I think Akin, you already answered that, saying the heart of the whole initiative really is, if we have 100 groups doing the same thing right around the globe, not just Canada, that is the intention. So I love that heart, and I just wanted to echo that again, just saying, yeah, just we encourage many. In fact, it would be great if we had a network of groups,
Yeah.
that we network together and feed off of each other, best practices, and have this going right around the globe. So my other question was already answered, so thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
There's a great question here. Can we have a group of 50 in the company that buys the land, and another company of 50 that develops the land, and then other people who can buy the development units? That's a great idea as well. That's another way of thinking about it, and see how that works.
I mean, we will have that discussion with the group and figure
idea.
out how to go about it. Because when we put out the survey to get how much people are willing to put in, some people put over 50,000 they're willing to put in. Some people put over 40,000. I don't want this to just be about money, but we have to kind of find a way to raise the money that we need, right? Maybe initially, like the person said, maybe we'll get those that are willing to put in over 50,000 to put up the initial capital to be shareholders. Who knows, right? And others can be investors, So we'll discuss with the group and vote on it and decide and get back to you on it. But,
great. So there's another great question here from Olu. So he's asking, what are the pros and cons of having just one director versus multiple? What are the liabilities the directors may face, and then any other added benefits? So in Ontario, you can have a minimum of one director, up to a maximum of 7. You can limit that number. And basically, the role of directors really is that they set up the policies or the goals or the vision of the business enterprise, and the administrative carrying out of the administrative responsibilities of the corporation. Now, once you have directors then have a secretariat that will have a officer. So officers are employees. So you may have a chief financial officer, for example, or a chief legal officer or chief operations officer. So officers are people who carry out the daily mandate, the daily carrying out of the actual running of the mill of the corporation. The actual operations are run by the corporation's officers. The directors are more up at the policy and administrative level. Now, directors can also be shareholders. Actually, in practice, directors, especially for startup companies or for private liability companies like this, also tend to be shareholders, but they provide leadership, visioning, and direction for the corporation. Certainly, if you have, say between 1 to 3 or 4 or 5, that provides diversity of, obviously, of views and opinion, but also accountability. Okay, so I think the other part of the question is what are the liabilities the directors may face? So basically, directors cannot act against the interests of the corporation. That's the first major responsibility under the Corporations Act. So a director cannot work to undermine the interests of the corporation. So let's say, for example, if this company is investing in land, for example, a director cannot leave and then go open a rival company that is doing the same thing while he's still working for the same company. So you cannot undermine or work against the interests of the corporation. Okay, there could be other examples. And then any added benefits? Well, any other benefits could be the corporation can then decide how to remunerate the directors, because the directors basically engage in more responsibilities compared to the other regular shareholders who are not involved in the policy making, visioning and directing of. They take on more responsibilities compared to the other shareholders who are not involved in the policy, management, decision making, all of that. So one of the benefits could be that the directors may actually end up being paid for the services they provide. Either they may be paid because they sit in the board meetings, so they may be paid for board sittings only or board allowances and things like that. But those are the things that the corporation itself has to decide internally, and those will be captured in the shareholder agreement. How do you remunerate directors? Because directors are not employees, the CFO and the others, the officers are employees, but directors technically are, but they're also shareholders providing direction. They may not sit Monday to Friday in the office. The officers do sit Monday to Friday in the office. They earn a salary, directors may earn an allowance. But those are things you have to discuss and agree as a corporation, also depending on how much money you have.
We can capture it in a bylaw and the shareholders agreement and all that. So
right.
Yeah.
There's a question from Sam Ademi. Good question here. Are there legal ramifications for the 5 corporations collaborating, even though they operate independently? Yeah, so I think the first legal ramification I can think about is obviously if you tie up together, that investment contract understanding creates a liability in the sense that it's an agreement, and if you're going to be raising money to conduct a project as a group of 5 companies, that project should be successful, especially if you're raising money from the public, because the public will need that money back. So one of the legal liabilities is that all those 5 companies will be liable to any person that they receive money from, whether it's an investor who's coming in as somebody providing seed money, or even if it's a financial institution lending money, the money is going to be given to this conglomerate or this consortium of 5 companies coming together, and the individual directors obviously would be guaranteeing those loans. So that's some of the liabilities that would hit all these 5 companies coming together.
So, Mr. Julius, there's another question here. I think because of your time, so can you just read that question? Yeah.
Which one?
The last one, yeah.
Are you aware of companies where shareholders get enough votes to take over the corporation? I don't know what taking over means here, because
maybe the shareholders decide to kick out the director.
Oh, okay, good question then. Okay, so I get it. So typically under the Ontario Business Corporations Act, the shareholders can elect directors for up to a maximum of 3 years term each. Okay, so if you have the initial directors for the first 3 years, so Akin and team, for example, every 3 years at your 3rd annual general meeting, you can have new directors presenting themselves to be elected. And the Class A shareholders will then make that decision. So directors will present themselves, they'll present their credentials. It will be a competitive affair. They'll be voting. And if the directors want to give the old directors who were serving for the last 3 years another 3-year term, they'll do that. If they want to blend them with new ones, they can do that. If they want to elect a completely new board as well, they can also do that.
All right.
I think Roslyn had her hand up.
Roslyn,
you never know.
lower your hand, unmute yourself, and ask your question.
And then we'll go into Courtney's question.
Courtney.
Hi.
Me, but,
Oh.
Hi, guys, and thank you, Mr. Julius. I really do appreciate you spending this time with us. We do not take your time for granted. Olu and Ross is actually Ross, so I wanted to go back to the previous question of the directors, and actually you kind of answered it with the idea of every 3 years we have to kind of re-elect the director. Where I was coming from, the question about having one director, which was originally advised, which advice that Akin had received previously, having just one advisor, which is why my first question was about protecting him, not because we don't want others doing what we're doing, we want a lot of people doing what we are doing, but meaning that he has this great idea, and because there are many of us, then perhaps his idea or what he wants to have happen gets circumvented, or vice versa, where we are kind of, I feel like in the power team, we're kind of in a limbo mode. And I'm not sure how deep the explanation went into, but obviously we have this start as a group of 250 plus people who saw a great idea to start a community. That's how it started. And then from that was born this quote power team of about 30 people who are now working to make it happen, people who have expertise in various fields and doing the grunt work. And this is what Akeem was talking about as far as finding a way to remunerate or give a special reward to those putting in all the extra time. And you did discuss the idea of, you know, remunerating those people with, say, extra shares and using their sweat equity. So I guess my question really is this. The director is the director of the corporation, for example, has basically the final say on what's sort of going to happen, is my understanding. And I liked how you said that having more directors can allow for more diversity and accountability. So what I'm wondering is it, you know, the way you describe the director sounds a lot like what the power team, or maybe even the project managers in this group, are doing. So it's not a matter of protecting per se, but really defining our roles and where we actually fit. And do we want to have just one director where the buck stops there, they face all the liability, but also then get the final say? Do we want, is it in our interest to diversify that versus having just the one? How, based on the way this is currently set up, would you advise if your client asked you, you know, how that should go?
Right. So in terms of good corporate governance, as it is practiced in Ontario and most of Canada, for a company that involves a large number of people like this, you know, if it was just a family business, you can just have one person as the president, and that's it. You know, if there are a bunch of friends who come together, you might probably just end up having, you know, two, you know, president and secretary. But typically, once you start becoming large, it's actually advisable to have at least three. You know, so you have out of those three, one is going to be the president of the corporation, the secretary, and then the treasurer. And for corporate governance, that is really important because the president is in charge of providing sort of leadership direction there, especially meetings. The secretary is in charge of taking all of the minutes and keeping the basic records for the corporation. So a meeting like today, if this was an annual general meeting or a special general meeting, your secretary will be taking all the minutes, all the proceedings, recording everything, and then keeping those records. So it's part of good corporate governance and corporate management. And then the treasurer is in charge of all of the issues regarding finance, you know, bank account, keeping the checkbooks, the CFO reports to him, and things like that. So in terms of structure, it will be ideal to have at least 2 or 3 core directors at the beginning, okay? That would be my suggestion for good corporate governance. Now, the directors don't have the final say on things. The shareholders have the final say, and that's by vote. That's why you have final sort of shareholders. So directors, if they're 2 or 3, will be part of that 50. They are shareholders as well. And they have one vote, just like all the other shareholders. So if there's an issue that is brought forward by a motion or for discussion, that issue is debated and then it is agreed upon by vote. So I just want to be clear that the director or directors don't really have the final say as far as major corporate issues are concerned, but they have a final say in terms of directing the operations at the secretariat or the corporation in terms of managing the running of the corporation day to day. They got to make sure these people report to the office, the employees are there, you know, functions are taking place. Whatever it is that the objectives of the company are, those are being driven in that direction. In terms of teams, what happens in some of the corporations that you could have committees, okay? Because of the specialization of skills and diversity of abilities that this group has, and functionally, you may have people that are skills, for example, in real estate development, or people in finance, and things like that, okay? What you do is have committees. So these committees then report to the board.
That's an awesome answer. Thank you so much. That was very clear.
So for the power team, that is, you know, one of the things I had in mind to, you know, because some of the members of the power team can then be maybe board of directors, who knows, right? Depending on, I mean, if those positions are open.
Yeah. And you can also split the power team into, once you get incorporated, you can split the power team into committees. So you have a finance committee, you'll have a land development committee, you have a real estate committee, you have an architecture committee, you have a zoning committee, whatever you want to do based on the skill set that is being brought in there and the expertise, you can do that.
Exactly. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the shareholders own the business. So,
yeah,
you know, and they're the ones that will make the decision. But in terms of the daily operations of the business, you know, the founder will have to, or the president in this case, will have to be the one to basically call the shot, like Mr. Julius said.
So, yeah, so there's another question there. How do I know if I'm officially a member of this group? I was added to the group by a friend, but has just been listening, reading messages, and doing the different surveys. Is there an official list of members? Yeah, I think Akin, you guys can answer that.
Yeah,
through your docket.
So we will you can definitely reach out to the group admin, and then we'll send you some of the materials you've missed so far in terms of, you know, the group
and
structure
in terms
and
of,
everything.
to answer specifically to membership, we cannot start making people members of something that's not established legally. So that's why we're now in the phase of meeting with Mr.
Experts,
Julius,
you know, trying to figure it out.
Figuring out how this is all gonna look. So we have 3 more minutes with Mr. Julius. Does anybody else have any more questions?
Maybe closing remarks from Mr. Julius. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for making the time out to be here with us tonight. We appreciate you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah, I guess I can only share one sort of little nugget from something I've learned recently from sort of a group that I worked with that was doing something very similar, which is that I think one of the challenges I have seen in the past, and this I'm not going to say anything that you guys don't already, is that usually when a group like this is forming, there's a lot of enthusiasm and, you know, the desire to come together, and for good reason. I mean, we all want to uplift each other individually, but also as a community. And, you know, certainly we have to be very clear that what are the values that are actually going to make us accomplish that objective? What things are going to make us strong instead of crumbling along the way? You know, so it's really important to have a sense of values. And even as a group, think about values. What kind of values are actually going to hold this group together as a corporation? Okay. And what sort of things can actually make this split up? Because that's the danger. The group dynamics can be very complicated. It's easy when you're a bunch of 5 friends or 6 family members who know each other and live in the same neighborhood or from the same country. And it's really easy to form a corporation and get going. But when you're 300 people from different backgrounds, even nationalities, interests and all of that, there has to be some core values that bring it together. So that's a challenge I want to throw out to you guys there. Think about values and actually have those core values as part of what's going to be the core identity for this group, tying it together as it moves forward. I can think of values like honesty, transparency, you know, accountability. These are really important core values that you have to have together that's going to hold you together. That's all I want to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Talking to you guys. All right. Okay. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. You know, amazing presentation from Mr. Julius. So yeah, our core values, we have to talk about this team. We have to think about it, but ultimately 100% transparency from day one is what, you know, we've been promoting and talking about. Tuko Pamoja, we are together. You know, that's why I love to use words like family all the time, because at the end of the day, we as a people, we have to get to a point where we realize that, you know, together we are stronger. We can do so much together. You know, individually we're okay, but together we can do great things. So and it's about time. You know, I want people that are tired of being tired, like people that have gotten to a point where they're like, you know, they're tired of seeing their kind. They're tired of seeing other Black people suffer. They're tired of seeing other Black people walk into a bank and can't get mortgages. They're tired of seeing Black people struggle to get loans, business loans. They're trying, I mean, you know, it's about time we build our own community. So whatever we have to do to make this work, let's do it. So other people from other parts of Canada can take the blueprint, take it and do the same thing. So this idea is not just about one hand. Honestly, I'm not even doing this for a dime. I want to do this so we have a legacy as a people. I want to walk on, I want to drive on a street that has Rosalind name on it. You know, I want to go to a shop, you know, that I know is owned by Miss Evadne. You see, that is what this is about. I want to visit our community center and see everybody's pictures on the wall. That is it. That is what this is about. So whatever it is, let's deal with our differences, you know, come together, man, and make this work. Not just for us, but for our children, you know. It's about time, honestly. You have anything to add?
No, I do. I agree with everything you just said. And again, thank you so much to the Power team. And 100%. I'm glad that everybody came out with their questions tonight so that we could really get 100%. A good framework, foundation for the framework of what we're trying to build here together. You all are very much appreciated. And I'm excited. It's a lot of work, and it can be stressful and tiring and everything like that. But at the end of the day, as you said, and I think Ms. Avani and Ms. Faith said, 7th generation. This is what we're planning for. It's not just for next generation, and this is it. Continuous wealth development, continuous legacy development for our people, and that's what I think that is the value, as Mr. Julius said, that all of us can stand on together. Misunderstanding. Go ahead. You can unmute yourself. I think you have your hand up. Misunderstanding, are you there?
I'm going to be editing this video, and I'll upload it on YouTube, and I'll be sending the link to everybody. So please, kindly, you can watch it again, because I'm going to do the same. Watch it again and take notes and stuff, and then we can meet and discuss as a group and figure out the best way forward, like what, how to register and structure the organization and everything like that. At the end of the day, we want to be 100% transparent, and we have to think about the bylaws. We have to come up with all the terms and everything we want in it. The shareholders agreement as well. We have so much to do. So guys, I love to move fast. So we have a lot of work to do. So let's all hands on deck. Let's do this together. So yeah, that's what it is. All right.
And for the rest of the group, if you're not on the Power team and you do have suggestions, questions, anything like that, if you're a specialist, if you're a lawyer, if you're a, developer, architect, whoever, whatever you do, if you can lend your expertise to the group, please feel free, reach out to us and let us know. Just wanted to say, okay, okay, great.
Yeah, man, we're doing this. It's about time. It's about time.
All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right, take care, people.